Welcome, everyone. To all the primary care providers joining us for this explainer, I am so glad you're here. Today, we're setting the stage for a real medical mystery. It's the kind of mystery that fundamentally challenges our everyday, automatic reliance on standard lab results. And honestly, it's going to completely reframe how we look at complex chronic illness in our clinics. We're calling it the Great Mimicker, unmasking environmental microbial illness.
Right off the bat, it's the ultimate clinical frustration, isn't it? What do you do when the labs come back perfectly normal, but the patient sitting right there in front of you is clearly, absolutely not okay? To anchor our discussion today, I want to introduce you to a mystery patient. This patient spent over 10 years, a full decade, suffering from severe, totally unexplained, multisystem symptoms. Every single morning, she woke up with just crushing fatigue. She had this intense head pressure behind her eyes, migratory joint pain, and brain fog so severe she literally struggled to find her words. Add to that food sensitivities, exercise intolerance, and these wild episodes of hives and mast cell activation. Some days she could kind of function, and other days she just simply couldn't.
Okay, let's dive into this patient's journey, because honestly, it's a path I know a lot of you will recognize. Over a decade, she bounced between completely isolated specialists while tirelessly searching for answers. From neurologists and rheumatologists to infectious disease experts, she was desperately looking for a reason for her decline, just endlessly moving from one waiting room to the next. And of course, alongside all those specialists came this massive, exhaustive battery of testing. We're talking MRI studies, deep autoimmune evaluations, inflammatory markers, infectious disease testing, hormone testing, you name it, they ran it. But here is the massive diagnostic blind spot. Despite all of this, the whole shebang, the results were either completely normal or showed only very minor abnormalities. Nothing ever came close to explaining the actual severity of her illness. Because of this, she was handed some pretty unhelpful labels. She was told, maybe it's just stress, or maybe this is just part of getting older. But eventually, something truly remarkable happened. The breakthrough diagnosis wasn't found in another MRI, and it wasn't found in yet another specialist's office. It was actually uncovered by asking a single, vital question. Tell me about the buildings where you spend your time. And here is the dramatic twist to our mystery. That patient was actually me. Now, I share my own story with you today, not because one single case proves causation. We all know it never does. But one carefully documented case can teach us how to think differently. And sometimes, that is exactly what our medical practice desperately needs. Let's move into Section 1, Beyond Individual Organ Systems, the whole human approach. We really need to look at the systemic diagnostic limitations of modern primary care. So as healthcare providers, we're traditionally trained to think in compartmentalized organ systems, right? Just like you see on the left here. The neurologist evaluates the brain, the rheumatologist evaluates the joints, the gastroenterologist evaluates the gut. It's like a giant puzzle where everyone is only looking at their one specific piece. But look at the right side. The reality is that patients do not experience illness one organ at a time. They experience illness as whole human beings, as a complete, fully interconnected system. And this disconnect between our training and their reality becomes incredibly apparent in patients suffering from persistent inflammatory symptoms and unexplained cognitive dysfunction. The absolutely crucial point here is this: normal laboratory studies do not always mean nothing significant is wrong. Throughout this explainer, I really want to challenge that fundamental clinical assumption. We've kind of unknowingly accepted that a clear lab panel means a clear patient. But in complex chronic illness, especially in patients with those multisystem issues we just talked about, that simply isn't always true. The laboratory studies don't always match the living, breathing patient sitting right in front of you. Which brings us to Section 2, the human environment shift, a century of change. To find the missing variable for these patients, we have to shift our focus away from internal biology and look outward. We have to ask ourselves, what has really changed about the human environment over the last 100 years? For nearly all of human history, people lived primarily outdoors or in naturally ventilated homes. Buildings breathed, windows stayed open, and honestly, water damage rarely remained concealed for long. But over the last century, our massive innovations in energy efficiency inadvertently changed the game. Just look at the right side. Modern construction. We insulated our walls, added indoor plumbing, filled those walls with paperback drywall and cellulose insulation, and installed central heating and AC that continuously recirculates the indoor air. We created incredible comfort, for sure, but we also inadvertently created the literal ideal environment for hidden microbial growth. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this staggering metric right here, 90%. Today, Americans spend nearly 90% of their lives indoors. Think about that. Home, school, work, healthcare facilities, the gym. If those environments become water damaged, the patient's exposure is no longer measured in hours. It's measured in years or sometimes even decades.
And this isn't just some rare edge case occurrence either. To put that into perspective, the World Health Organization estimates that visible dampness or mold is present in approximately 10 to 50% of indoor environments worldwide. The CDC likewise recognizes damp indoor environments as an important widespread public health concern that's directly associated with respiratory and allergic illness. This means that up to half of the buildings our patients are spending 90% of their time in could be actively water damaged.
Moving right along to Section 3, assessing the cumulative burden, the total load. So you might be wondering, why do some people in these water-damaged buildings get incredibly sick while others seem to remain completely healthy? Let's look at a functional framework to explain this.
We really need to reframe how we view chronic illness. It's rarely caused by one single thing. Cumulative burden is the total load of various stressors on the human body. The evidence doesn't support the idea that mold causes every disease in every person. Rather, chronic exposure to water-damaged environments acts as a critical source of oxidative stress and immune dysregulation in susceptible individuals. It's basically the straw that breaks the camel's back.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how microbial exposure fits perfectly into the much larger puzzle of a patient's health. You have internal factors on one side, things like genetics, hormonal dysfunction, and psychological stress, interacting directly with external factors on the other, like pollutants, heavy metals, and of course microbes. Rather than just asking, did mold cause this disease, we must ask, is it the missing piece of this much larger, really complex puzzle?
Every single day in primary care, we see patients carrying these exact diagnoses: chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, chronic Lyme disease, SIRS, long COVID, autoimmune disease. Now, I want to be completely clear here. Sometimes these diagnoses are entirely appropriate and spot on, but occasionally, despite totally appropriate evaluation and standard treatment, something still just doesn't fit. For the patients whose symptoms just don't align with the standard outcomes, environmental exposure is often the hidden culprit. They're told everything looks normal, yet they absolutely know they are not normal. This is exactly where we, as medical professionals, must expand our clinical toolkit. We've got to look at the environment with the exact same level of curiosity as we do our laboratory studies. Once we begin treating a patient's environmental history as a critical diagnostic metric, giving it the exact same weight as an inflammatory marker or an MRI scan, we finally begin finding answers for those patients who have otherwise completely slipped through the cracks.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for the day. As you head back to your clinics and review your patient charts, I really challenge you to adopt this new holistic perspective. When you are faced with that very next unexplained medical mystery, the patient with the picture-perfect labs, but the crushing, debilitating fatigue, will you ask about the building in your very next patient consultation? Because it just might be the single question that changes their life. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.